Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. To finish season 1 of Running in the 70s, here's the last part of my conversation with the amazing Lorraine Moller.
Let's back up. There's so much we can talk about. Let's talk about the breakthrough of the barrier of money. Just tell that. I know you weren't by yourself. You partnered with some other people and made a conscious decision to defy the system.
Yes, we became aware that there was money within the sport, and it was all cash, brown paper bag that went under the table. And the women didn't get it, the Africans didn't get it. They were the select white top male athletes that would take the bulk of everything, and then we'd get whatever was left over. There was a movement growing, and this movement had risen and fallen quite a few times throughout the sport. Not that I was involved with it, but at this particular time, this was the 1981 Cascade Runoff, which was a 15K in Portland, Oregon, very big race, sponsored by Nike. Nike put up a $100,000 purse, and it was designed to get the athletes en masse to take the money and push for this professionalism, but to do it in a way that it couldn't be ignored. Because usually if it's just one person doing it, whatever, you'd just get picked off, you'd get banned for life and scare everybody else off. So it had to be strength in numbers. There was a meeting the night before and the athletes were invited and we went. So it was put on the table and it was said that if you want to run, you have to sign up and say you're taking the cash. And we were in good company. There was Bill Rogers and Frank Shorter and all the top Americans and etc. There was this good purse, first, second, and third. You got 20,000, 10,000, 5,000, which was really a pretty cool. I decided, I was so buzzed. I was with Alison Rowe and Anne Ordain, and we're like, Anne's, I'm doing it. I've run out of money. I'm going to do it no matter what. Alison was hot on it, and she said, oh, I feel like a Christian going to the Crusades. And so we all signed up for it. We went, okay, if you do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, you do it. And so we got in this race, and Anne finished first in the women's, Alison finished second, I finished third. And we all took the money. And then all hell broke loose in New Zealand.
You weren't going to get away with that easily.
Yeah, the Americans took the money in the men's, and there was also, I think, a masters runner. I think it was Domingo Tibaduiza. He also took the money. And so then we all sat and waited. It was huge news in New Zealand. It was a front page on the newspapers, and our federation got into gear, and then they had an emergency meeting, and then they declared us banned. Alison was living in New Zealand. Anne and I were in the US. So Alison was getting the brunt of it. She got a lawyer, and then she claimed she hadn't taken the money. She'd put it in a trust. They didn't ban her. So then it was Anne and I that were left out. They'd made a stand and they were heavy-handed. But the public opinion was so sympathetic. Even the Prime Minister came out and claimed that we were brave and we were making a stand against hypocrisy and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, Anne and I just kept on racing.
Did the race directors just invited you even though you were poisoned at that point?
Yes, there was a showdown at the Bobby Crim 10 miler, and I showed up, and then we'd formed our own federation, the Association of Road Running Athletes. And that was fairly active. That was spearheaded by Don Cardon and Chuck Gelford, who's a lawyer, who was also the race director of the Cascade Runoff. So I went to this Bobby Crim 10 miler, and the night before the race, I got called by the race director who said, you cannot run. there are 3 British guys here, and these British guys said that if they run against me, that their federation will ban them for racing against a professional. So that was the contamination rule that existed on the books.
Right.
And so I went to the Americans, the ARA Federation, and I said, this is the situation. They're telling me I can't run because these guys would get banned. And so we've got John Sinclair, Don Cardong, Paddy Catalano, all the top American runners. And they went to the race director and said, if she doesn't run, we don't run.
Oh,
Isn't that incredible? Isn't that
that's
just so
brilliant.
amazing? Because everybody said the athletes can't pull it off because they're all out for themselves and they won't come together as a group. And that was proof. It was like, it gave me so much faith and heart in my fellow runners that we really were cohesive as a group. And they did the right thing. Bill Rogers, yeah. And so I ran the race, and the 3 Brits didn't. They stood on the sideline.
Wow. Uncontaminated, but that's
Uncontaminated.
wow.
But you know what I did was I contaminated a whole field. So, you know, it became viral, right?
Yeah,
And,
there you
and
go.
so
The Lorraine pandemic of the early 80s. Yeah.
yeah, so that gives the administration their rules. The IAAF, they've got now a real problem because they've got this rule and they can't contain it. And then I went back to New Zealand and I was banned along with Anne Ordain and what was coming up. So this was the 82 Commonwealth Games in Brisbane. New Zealand suddenly realizes we've just banned 2 of our greatest medal prospects in the women's middle distance running. So they were looking for a way to bring us back. And that's when the trust fund solution was brought up. So if you put your money in a trust, then you'd be able to have it and you'd be able to withdraw it for expenses and all that kind of stuff. So that was the solution that was made. And so I was reinstated, and then Anne was reinstated after me. And we both went on and won multiple medals in the Commonwealth Games. It was a good move for New Zealand. So the trust fund system became the way station, and then somehow it just went out the door and became
And
moot.
we don't have to name names, but sure, in that trust fund system, there were people buying things that weren't living expenses with that money too. It was just a step that needed to be taken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk about Boulder. It was one of the hot spots. You've got Eugene, Boston, Denver, and Boulder going on with the running scene of all kind of runners from all over the world at all kind of distances. What was it like training there for you? I've talked to a lot of the guys that I knew from Western Pennsylvania, Pete Lucas, Mark Muggleton, Steve Francis now from New York, that were out there in that same time frame. And they talk about showing up at a track and just seeing who's there and doing a workout. Were you more structured in your workouts, or were you part of that free-flowing community?
No, yeah, look, I had my own program that I followed, but we'd go down to Pottsfield, which is the track down there, and yeah, to be a who's who, it'd be like a little mini Olympics. No, it was absolutely amazing. And we had quite a nice group. There was Priscilla Welch from England. Ingrid Christensen was coming and training for long periods of time. Steve Jones moved there from England. Steve's still there. Mark Platches from South Africa, right, world champion in the marathon. Turo Barrios, world record holder in the 10,000 meters. Rob Di Castella, absolutely one of the greatest marathoners. And oh gosh, it just goes on and on. We would get together and train together. We would socialize together. It was so much fun. And I remember, Matthew, I went to a turkey trot because I went, okay, I'll win a turkey. And so my family will have a turkey for the evening. So I'll run down to the turkey trot and get myself a turkey with a 5K run. I get to the start line and there's Ingrid Christensen, Rosa Motor, and it's all on for this turkey. And I think I finished third, and third was a mug, and I didn't get a turkey. And I was like, dang. And Rosa Motor came over, and she must have seen my look or whatever. And she said, look, we don't have Thanksgiving. I don't want the turkey. You have mine. So I got the turkey anyway, because Rosa Motor gave me hers. But that was the climate there. It was terrific. I loved it.
I'll jump around a little bit because I almost got to be where you were and meet you. I bluffed my way into the Sydney games with a press pass. I was diving on the Barrier Reef, and a friend, and I was living in Egypt writing for a magazine, and I got them to give me a letter, and I ended up working a press pass. But you had an eventful start to those Olympics.
Yes. Yes, I ran the 96 Olympics. I was 41 years old. It was the finish line for me. I knew that was it, and that was fine. And then when you've been doing something like that for so long, you go, what do I do next? What could possibly compare to and have such the intensity of experience that you're used to? And the only thing that would come to mind was that I wanted to be a mother. I had put it off for all those years, and I wanted to have a baby. And I had miscarriages just about every year up to 1999. I finally got pregnant around the new year of 2000. And every time I had a miscarriage, I went, oh God, maybe I should go back and start racing again or doing something. But it was not an easy transition, I think, trying to go from athlete and using my body in that way to going into being a mother, and a completely different type of use of your body. I stopped running, I put on weight, I did all these things that I thought I was supposed to do to get pregnant. And then they told me I was too old and my eggs were too old and all this kind of stuff. And I remember a doctor telling me that, and I just went, my chances of winning an Olympic medal at my
Gotta be
age
thinner
is
than
way
that.
less
Yeah.
than having a baby. I've got to be able to do this, which was a confidence and that I had gained or garnered from my running years. So anyway, I got pregnant, and the pregnancy lasted, and it came to August. No, it was September, early September. The opening ceremony was on TV at the Sydney Olympics. And this was the first Olympics that I hadn't been to, and the first Olympic marathon that I hadn't been to, because I'd been to all of them up to that date. And I sat down on the couch. I've got this great big pregnant tummy. The opening ceremony starts and my body goes, showtime. And I went into labor, right? And then, yeah, I had a marathon labor, I must say. A few days later, I ended up with my daughter, lovely daughter, and she was a 9-pound baby at altitude. And the midwife had a look at that. She had the placenta, and she's going, I've never seen one with such good blood supply.
All right.
Can I take it? Can I show it to my birth class? I'm like, hey, okay. Yeah. So I think that ultimately that all that training enabled me to give birth to a healthy child at age 45.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was my gold medal Olympics.
Yeah. Not bad. So that's a great story. You've mentioned your relationship through the years with Arthur Lydiard, training Arthur Lydiard himself. You got formally involved with the Lydiard method.
Yes, as Arthur died in 2004 while on tour in Texas. And what he left was, I think, a legacy of training that has probably influenced coaching and modern training methods more than any other person in the world. He put it together, was putting it together in this sequential fashion, all the training systems, so that, and his method was based on peaking. So being able to reach a peak performance on the day that counts. That was the method I was brought up in, and all the New Zealanders, and it underscored our whole training culture, not just in running, it spilled over into many other sports, and I think was a basis for the sporting, not dominance, but maybe that a small country could perform and get
Out
medals.
of scale. Yeah, out of
Yeah,
scale.
yeah.
Yes.
Arthur was pretty much a one-man band. He didn't want anybody to organize him. He didn't want to be interfered. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do. And I can completely understand that. Before he died, he allowed a small group of us to form a foundation to continue his name and his training methods. So our original Lydiard Foundation was in New Zealand. We then formed one in the US, and I've been involved with that since 2004. Now we have courses for coaches. People ask me what I'm doing. I say I coach coaches. Currently, I'm teamed with another coach in the UK. We give the courses together. We have a lot of fun, but we do offer the coaches this method in detail about how to reach a peak performance on the day that counts. There's both a lot of science and a lot of art in it. The thing about Arthur, Matthew, is that he was probably the first guy to talk about periodization, even though the exercise physiology has had to catch up with Arthur Lydiard rather than the other way around. Peter Snell, who was his star athlete and was on our board for many years till he died, Peter got doctorates in sports science and sports medicine and etc., and studied the method and why it worked. And after all this years of studies and research, and he's a very scientific type of guy, he said that the method was perfect as it is. The only
Amazing.
thing that he would have added was maybe doing some strides in the base period just to get leg turnover or maintain leg turnover, but otherwise it was absolutely perfect. And it spoke for itself because it really is very successful, and it was adopted by many other countries. Interestingly enough, the only country that didn't adopt, not the only one, but one of the countries that didn't adopt Lydiard training as its official training method was New Zealand.
Really? That's crazy. What about Arthur Lydiard as a person away from running? Did you know him in that context?
Yes, I met Arthur. He would tour the countryside and he would be spreading the good word about training, and he would come to the clubs and speak, and anybody who was trained under his methods. So, with John Davies coaching me and going to the godfather Arthur, Arthur considered we were all his children, all his athletes. He took our performances really personally. He would come up and like, how's your training going and what are you doing? And he had tabs on me from when I was a teenager. So that influence was always there. If Arthur said something, that was like, you had to do it. In fact, at the Commonwealth Games in 1974, we had to run the national championships to get a qualifying place. The 1500 meters was the first event that I tried for, and I didn't finish in the first three in the final. Then my next chance for making the team was the 800 meters. Arthur came up to me before the race. He said, I saw you in the 1500 meters and you were waving to your boyfriend in the stands, and you weren't focused at all, and you ran just shockingly, and that's just not good enough. Now you get into that 800 meters and you focus on the job that you're supposed to be and you make that team. Boy, I went out there and I made that team because I was too scared not to.
That's brilliant. I talked with a runner in Pennsylvania. He talked about going around with Arthur at some of the shows for the New York Marathon and everything. The comment he remembered is Arthur said, I like these American hotels, but the problem is they don't have a fridge for the beer. So do you remember anything about him? Certainly it was okay for him to drink alcohol. I don't know what he thought about that for athletes, but he seemed like a great guy to socialize with too for people.
beer back in New Zealand was the first replenishment drink. Yeah, I was running with a group when I was at university. So I would have been 17, 18, 19. We would do our Sunday runs with this group of guys. So the pubs were all closed on a Sunday. It was against the law to be open on a Sunday. And somebody knew somebody who owned a pub. So we would all finish on Sunday at this pub and they would have beers. And I was given stout and raspberry, because stout and raspberry build your blood,
Right.
get your minerals back. Who needs Gatorade and all those things? Yeah.
The many honors you've gotten, you're in the Boulder Hall of Fame, you're a MBE. What was that like? The government, the crown.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah, I went to Wellington, which is the capital city of New Zealand, and I had a beautiful dress and a hat English people wear to the races. And then the Governor General representing the Queen presents you with this award, and you get your picture in the paper, and you get to use these letters after your name, member of the British Empire. And I've got my certificate from the Queen, which is hanging on the wall. Yeah, it's all lovely traditional stuff. Yeah.
Well, it is a great life story that you've had so far. There's somebody, Rod Dixon is another famous New Zealand athlete. Did you cross paths with him?
Yes, Rod's one of my good friends. We talk,
Okay.
yeah, quite often. Rod's in New Zealand at the moment. He does the Rod Dixon's Kids Marathon program, which he's had probably 500,000 kids go through that program, and it's designed to get children into an exercise habit, and also in schools, because sitting is the new smoking, and it's terrible for our kids. And just running a K a day and having lots of running games and getting them in a program, the kids absolutely love it, because kids are made to move. And I've been involved with Rod in that. I've gone to quite a few schools with him. I wrote a program for him for the teachers and coaches of his program on children's development and how the role of competition and how important it is for them to develop their aerobic infrastructures, or at least not to be contained and stopped from moving, which a lot of kids are these days, which is tragic.
I think I've tried to send a message to Rod on Facebook. Maybe you could give him a nudge. I'd love to talk to him. I know his life story is quite interesting.
Yes.
And it's taken some very interesting turns. I don't know if he'd like to talk about that. That I think people would be fascinated.
Rod is a fantastic guy to interview, because he's so charismatic and he's full of stories. And you can imagine that if we'd get together and some of these old New Zealand, I remember Dick Quacks and Rod and I in a bar. It was actually in Texas at a remembrance of Arthur Lydiard. And oh man, we were drinking probably too much and telling stories, and it's just laughing my head off at the shenanigans these guys would get up to. That was so much of the culture, because it was like run hard, play hard. And there was always a real fun element and a sense of joy and a sense of camaraderie. And I'm sure that young people today have fun, but there's so much to always be like projecting this performance, and that it overtakes this persona of having to be great, and I'm going to post all my workouts on Strava. We would never do that. That was like to show off about what you're going to do or talk about your workouts. It was, you kept that close. That was a big no.
But that is also a part of the Kiwi national culture, the no tall poppies to thing, which may be a little bit nationalistic influence there. I was just down my last trip to New Zealand, went through Wellington, then we were in Nelson and then Apple Tasman hiking and Apple Rock. And I know that's Rod's stomping grounds where he came from, I think.
Yeah, Rod's living at Apple Rock. We just talk
Oh,
about
is he?
Apple Rocks. It's amazing that you bring it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that'll encourage him to talk to me. Yeah. One thing I want to ask you about is these podcasts are so nice for me to get to know people, and life stories are just compelling for everyone. There aren't that many books written of the times. There's, of course, some great running books. There's some great fictional running books. Bob Hodge has a book called Tale of the Times, which is very popular now. And you've written a book. What was it like writing a book, and what was your goal in writing the book you wrote?
I started writing it, I don't know, it probably took me about 10 years to write it. My rival Anne Ordain was writing a book, and I went, oh, if she's writing a book, I got to write a book. So there, it just continued. Yeah, thank you, Anne. I started writing, and I love to write. I am a word person. I revel in my words. I started writing just vignettes, just stories as I remembered them, and then I started to put them together, and I went from the beginning when I was born, and I started to arrange my life story. As I got into the running, I would find myself, I'd get writer's block, and I wouldn't know where to go next. And so I'd go for a run, and that would invoke the muse. And then I'd come back and be able to put it down on paper. Some things were I love telling the story, but some things were loaded for me, like painful things that maybe I had buried in the subconscious. So what I did was I made a pact with myself that I wasn't going to write it as if anybody else was going to read it but myself. And that enabled me then to just put whatever came up on the page without filtering it or censoring it as it was coming out. And it was very personal. It was like writing a diary, and all my thoughts and feelings and all the rest. And a lot of those things that were very loaded, or where I felt were very personal, or that I was doing a number on myself. Oh, you're not good enough. You weren't fast. Oh, you only got a bronze medal. That was quite a loaded one for me. How hard can an athlete be on themselves? But that was a strong driving force to always trying to prove yourself. And I thought, I'm going to prove that I am good enough for whatever, lovable, etc., by having this gold medal. And I never got it. And I had to come to terms with that. And in writing the book, I wove it into a story where it made sense to me and was meaningful. So it was a very cathartic process. The book was published, and I thought, oh, the editor will just take out all the bits that are too personal. People go, oh, God, I can't believe she said that. And they didn't. They left it as was, pretty much as I wrote it, which in some ways was a big compliment. It's like my personal life, my sex life, my being a woman, trying to have a relationship, and this scene where I'm doing this very masculine thing and having boyfriends that felt emasculated because I'm running faster, I'm earning more money, I'm on the stage, I'm getting more attention, all those kinds of things, culminating to coming to this point where I'm trying to have a baby, I'm having all these miscarriages. Now I've gone through making my place as a woman in this man's world, and now I'm trying to get back into the feminine role and have a baby. And on the stage where the whole dynamic between men and women was going through a rapid change, and just realizing our potential as human beings. And all this came out in the book. When I went back and I read the parts that were so loaded, they actually seemed really stupid, quite trivial. It put them in their correct place. I was, in a sense, just being over dramatic and very hard on myself, very unkind on myself in many ways. My book was published at the end of 2008, and I went down to New Zealand for this book launch. I had done a favor for the Minister of Health at the time, who was the leader of the opposition, it's MP Helen Clark. I had supported her in 1990 on a no smoking advertising bill for New Zealand, because if you ever look at Arthur Lydiard's stuff and Peter Snell, they were sponsored by Rothmans. That was the only
Right.
sponsorship they could get. It's absolutely absurd, but Rothmans wanted for it to seem like a healthy thing to do, like, ride on the backs of these great sportsmen. And it always seemed to me very wrong to do that. And she wanted to change that. So I supported her. The tobacco companies put a lot of money into trying to kill the bill that she was presenting to Parliament, with the support of a lot of athletes. The Commonwealth Games were there. They pledged their medals to her. We met on the steps of Parliament, etc. And she won, and she became Prime Minister. The night of the launch of my book, which was at a big bookstore in Queen Street in New Zealand, and the roads were all closed. And I couldn't figure out, and then the person that I was with who represented the book thing said, "Oh, didn't you know the Prime Minister is coming to launch your book for you?" So it was like such a great honor. And she was really paying back something that she saw as a favor to me, which I thought was really wonderful, that there was what she considered like a fair exchange and that she could do this for me. And yeah, I have been honored in so many ways through my sport, and it has been the most wonderful journey. I am so grateful and blessed to have had this.
It's great. You're very appreciative. You're a charming person. It's great to talk with you. I feel like I know you just from 2 hours talking. We could probably talk for many more hours, but we'll encourage people to read your book. I'll put a few links to the write-ups that tell about the overview of your story, and all the runners want to see your times, and that we can find them on Wikipedia and these other articles there. It's been great talking with you. Of course, you have the drive, but you're humble and appreciative. It's just a wonderful combination that's gotten you to where you are today.
Thank you, Matthew. And if anyone wants to find me, I'm at lydiardfoundation.com or .org. Either of those will do. Lorraine at lydiardfoundation.org will get somebody there. And I'd really like, if the coaches and they're interested in our programs, it's really great. And my book is called On the Wings of Mercury, by the way. It's out of print, but you can get a secondhand copy. Don't pay the earth for it. I am going to get it republished pretty soon.
What's your hashing stories?
Well, it's hash associated. Okay. When I was wondering what to do when I left school, and I decided on phys ed school, that was in Dunedin. It was the furthest away from home I could go. Like, let me out of here. I'm a teenager. I was still 17 when I went to university. So the first day that I was there, I was changed into my running gear. I was standing on the steps of the phys ed school in my shorts and my running shoes, wondering which way to go. And I looked down the street, and this group of guys came running. And they saw me standing there in my running shoes, and they yelled out, "Hey, chick, you're going to come and run with the boys today?" And I went, "Sure." So I bounded down the steps. I joined onto the back of this group of runners, and they were every lunchtime runners. So they would all gather and have a lunchtime run, and did a course around the town. And I could barely keep up. They were very good runners. There were a lot of them were national representatives, but I hung on to them. The next day I was there again. And so they became my training group. And so it really upped my training. We'd have a race on Saturday, Sunday. They would do their equivalent of the Lydiard Waitarua run in Auckland was the Waitaddies, in which is always you run out, you go over the biggest hilliest climb and come down the other side. That was about a 23-mile run that I'd run with these guys on a Sunday. So you can see by the time I got to the marathon, I was well set up. But anyway, so I was given my hash name, which is running chick.
That's fantastic.
So I'm
Fantastic.
still the running chick when I go down there, and probably I wouldn't fly these days. But anyway, I was quite happy.
It would. Yeah, I think the Americans have made the hash names kind of get out of control, vulgar. My hash name is Ra from the Egyptian, the shortest hash name in the world. That's an appropriate name for you. A good hash name, and I am going to pelt the Hash House Harrier Facebook groups once I publish this that you're a hasher and they need to listen to your life story for the rest of the story. That's not hashing. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you,
All right.
Matthew. Matthew, I will introduce you to Rod if you want. Also,
Yeah.
might be really nice to interview Rod. He's having the 40th anniversary of his New York City win.
I assume he's quite a different person than he was in his 20s and 30s with all the things that have gone in his life. I don't know if he's written his life story.
No, he hasn't. No, he's thinking about it. He's had
Yeah.
people that want to do it, and then he thought that maybe I would write it for him. He's got such stories, and he was such a very playful, like he and I and most of us in New Zealand, we'd end up battling with the administrators. And it happens in just about every country. The top athletes you would have this small group of people that would want to contain them somehow, and people at that level, they're not containable. I can remember as a teenager, and Rod, Dixon, John Walker, they were the big three. And when they walked into a stadium, it was like the movie stars arrived, and they would all have their fancy Adidas gear and the stripes down the side and white pristine pants and all new stuff. And the whole stadium and everybody had been looking at them, and they'd sort of be strutting their stuff. Great. People would say, "Oh, we know they're getting money. We know they're getting money," And I can remember thinking, I want to be like them. I want to be in that group.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on this side. That's my tribe there. And Dick Quacks became my coach for many, many years.
Oh.
And
the guy from Pennsylvania, Jeff Bradley, he won the national AAU 10K one year in central Pennsylvania, where I lived there for a little while. Rod Dixon was there with Jeff Bradley for a while. It was good friends with Rod, and he hasn't talked to him in decades. So there's a few people through this podcast that said, "Oh, I know them." They'll see their episode and then call me up and say, "You got their phone number? I want to talk to them after 20 years." So actually, it'd be great. I think Jeff will really appreciate hearing from Rod again. Maybe I can help them have a chat too.
Yeah. At Atlanta Olympics, Dick stayed in Jeff Galloway's house. He had two houses at the time. Yeah, those connections, there's sort of that old crowd. You just keep sort of going around. And the worst thing about retiring is that you don't see your old friends as much,
Yeah.
Yeah. Rod Dixon has a great saying, and he says, learn by doing. That's his philosophy, and that life is to be experienced. So every experience has its value and adds to the story and the richness of the story. Some of those experiences, I'm sure some people read my book and went, "Oh my God," and put it down. I can remember my mother reading it in the next room, and I could hear her going, "Oh, Lorraine, oh, Lorraine." But it was a way of like finishing off that era of my life and putting it in a book, and then going, I'm done now. I'm starting afresh and something new. Look, the stories, they're just stories in the end. And you're picking out pieces of information. Other people will go, "No, that's not the way it happened." I was reading Anne's book and I'd go, "That's not true. That's not true. I have to write my version of it." Then people would come up to me and they'd go, "It wasn't like that." And I go, "Well, write your own book then."
Mm-hmm.
I'm the author, so I get to say what I want. I would encourage your friend to look at everything that has happened as a blessing, because it brings you to the present moment with the knowing and understanding that you have. And there's no other way you can get there. I like the hero's journey and the Joseph Campbell stuff. And Joseph Campbell says that the cave that you fear to enter is the cave that holds the treasure. And I liked that the running was a way of always sort of like coming up against yourself and confronting your own fears of, am I worthy to stand on the Olympic podium? Oh, I can allow myself third place, but I can't allow myself the gold, because there's something that doesn't fit with who I think I am. So I'm going to place myself in a position where third is the best that I can get when I'm facing off with that part of myself that's going, who do you think you are? It's such a neat and interesting way for us to face ourselves and to learn about ourselves. And the thing about running is that the energy moves. It's going to move because you're moving. That's it,
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Thank you so much for all this time, Lorraine. It's been great talking to you. Who should play you in a movie? They should make a movie about your life.
gosh, yeah. I always thought I'd be sort of like a cross between maybe like a Bridget Jones and in the in the stadium, an
right,
athletic Bridget Jones. No, I don't know. Yeah. Um,
I know all the people that maybe were less aware of your story will really be excited about hearing this. So
thank you.
thanks again.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Thanks. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.